In this video, we're going to give you 8 tips to dominate every single engagement. If you want to win more 1v1s and carry your team far more often, then you got to watch this video to the end, especially tips 7 and 8, because you're going to come out just dominating even ONYX players in gunfights. But the GameLeap website down below is the best place if you want to learn proper decision making so that you can always take strategically advantaged fights, rack up them kills, and actually come out with the dub again and again. So do yourself a favor and go check it out right now down below. Now, the first thing that we actually need to talk about, and it's a pretty simple one, but it's so important, and it's just crosshair placement. And that's specifically where you are aiming in the time frames where there is no one to aim at. A good thing to understand is that the less you have to move your crosshair from where you are aiming to where the enemy is at, the easier the shots are going to be and the more reliable you're going to be able to get first shot and pump out damage on the enemy. This means that whenever you peek a corner or turn an angle, you are already pre-aiming at common angles where enemies are at. If you have some information about where they could be, your crosshair placement is put in a place not too close to the wall, but not too far away, to where if an enemy shallow peeks that corner or wide jump peeks that corner, there's going to be very little time between them showing themselves and you getting right on target dealing damage to them. In a lot of the further ranges, you actually want to pre-scope before you even look out at them on the horizon. Now, the next big reason that you're losing a lot of fights is that you never have bullet advantage because you're sprinting far too much. Unless you have perfect confirmation that there are no enemies between where you are at and where you are running to, it is a really good idea that you actually stop sprinting and just peek out with your gun out in any open space or long sight line. This will make sure that you are ready to shoot the moment you see an enemy, because in that delay between you sprinting and stopping, the enemy is going to be able to get that bullet advantage on you that is going to be almost impossible to overcome. And many of you are just running around the map without perfect confirmation where the enemies are. You're getting caught out, you're taking damage for free, and oftentimes you are actually just losing the fight before it even starts. Now, the next big tip is something that even pro level players incorporate, and it's swapping up angles peaked. This is really strong to do, where maybe you peeked out the right side, you did a little spray, you peek out the right side of an obstruction again and spray again, and then you're gonna actually peek the left side afterwards, and then you're gonna peek the left side twice, and you're peeking the same angle, but you're peeking it from a different position. And the thing that this does is really messes with the enemy looking at you. They're thinking you're gonna peek that right angle because you showed it twice, and then you peek the left angle. And by then, they're gonna actually take extra damage because all you do need is that millisecond of extra damage, a free burst on them, and descoping them. And that really can allow you to get a ton of damage on the enemy. In addition to that, you can even pre-fire enemies if they are just holding and they're waiting for you to peek out to shoot you instantly. You can actually utilize peeker's advantage by walking out of that angle just a little bit, pre-firing at their exact location, and then de-peeking. And what this basically forces them to do is this forces them to back off that angle. They can't hold that angle anymore if you keep jiggle peeking it and pre-firing it. Now, the next big tip I have for you is about where you are aiming on the target. Remember, you want to be aiming towards the center of mass, especially if the enemy is not weak at all. Remember, there's no big benefit to actually aiming head level unless you have a sniper rifle or unless the enemy is weak or cracked. Now, that doesn't mean that you never aim head level unless they're cracked, because when enemies' shields are very lit up, you actually want to potentially break their shield with the first 2 shots of your burst and then finish them off with the last one of your BR. So it's really going to change relative to how weak the enemy is. If the enemy is very healthy, you always want to be aiming center of mass so that the shots are the easiest to connect and you connect with the most amount of them. And this is going to go even double for the next tip, which is about damage numbers, specifically the fact that you need 2 bursts, 2 full bursts, so that's 6 bullets, plus a melee to kill an enemy. If an enemy is pushing you and you have to spray them for the full 2 bursts in order to actually get that melee and get that kill, that trade, or whatever the case may be, you got to make sure that not a single bullet hits. And when enemies are pushing you rapidly and swaying left and right, if you try to aim head level here, you're going to miss at least 1 bullet. And it's going to cause you to either need a burst again, which will probably get you killed, or you're not even going to be able to burst again and you're just going to die. Now, speaking of damage numbers, remember that 3 bursts plus the last burst where 2 of the bullets go to shields and the last bullet goes into the head will kill flat out, and that will be a perfect. Now, this requires you to make sure that you hit every single shot, but a typical way that this would go down is the first 3 bursts, body, 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 center of mass body, and the last burst is intentionally in the head. You could even aim neck level and then move up as the burst goes through, but I think just trying to hit the last one in the head is more important. And remember to stabilize your aim when enemies are very weak. A lot of times when enemies are cracked, they're gonna do crazy things like jump, fly through the air. They're gonna try to do a mix-up so that you miss their head. But if you take your time, you utilize your health advantage to make sure that your shot connects, then it's going to always turn out in your favor rather than panicking and wasting too many shots. Now, the next thing that we need to talk about is actually grenade bounces, and this is a way that you can actually 2v1 enemies, and how it works is you look pretty close to right at the ground, you throw a grenade, it bounces up right in front of you, and you're gonna shoot the enemy as it explodes, and typically here, you're gonna wanna aim head level. Now, there's 2 tricks to this. The first one is adjusting the angle of bounce depending on how far away the enemy is, right? If they're really close, you want to bounce it like at a far steeper angle than if they're further away. And I would highly suggest just going to like a training room where you're playing against bots and just practice bouncing your grenades. Practice getting them exactly where you want to. You're not gonna have to do this for very long to be very precise with how you bounce your grenades, because the next thing, and this goes double for you controller players, where you have to literally look down, bounce it, and then look back up, it can be pretty difficult to do, and it's gonna take some practice. And if you haven't gone through the motions, what's gonna happen often is you're gonna throw the grenade way too steep and it's going to hurt you, or you're gonna whiff the grenade by a mile and an enemy's just gonna slide up to you and push you. So I would highly suggest you practicing this grenade floor, bounce, and then aim head level and get some free kills and potentially some 1v2s as well. Now, before we get to the 2 most important tips, make sure you check out the GameLeap website if you want more in-depth tips and strat breakdowns where we break down pro play and so much more. Go check it out. But the 7th tip is to run the freak away. And I know what you're saying, win more gunfights. How am I gonna win more gunfights by running away? But you need to understand when a fight is already lost. Oftentimes, if you peek a corner out, and maybe you weren't looking at the right place, or maybe your aim wasn't like perfect there, and you know that the enemy got the first hit on you. Now, sometimes you could alpha up, and sometimes you could win, you know, even if the enemy gets first shot on you, but as enemies get better, you can't expect an enemy to play poorly. Oftentimes, if you don't get that great start to an engagement, it's just better to run away. And that is going to be true in a lot of situations where you peek around a corner, the enemy gets that first shot on you, you just dip right out of there. You go, you reset, you take it off angle, or you let yourself heal, and then you get another shot at getting another fight. Essentially what you're doing here is fishing for the proper engagement, fishing for the engagement where you're advantaged in, or at the very least even in, rather than trying to overcome mechanically a fight that you're already losing like right off the bat. So this is incredibly important, and this is probably the most important tip that is preventing you from climbing if you keep making this mistake. Now, the last tip that I have for you to dominate every engagement is with item mix-ups, specifically with the repulsor and the thruster. These are amazing mix-up weapons that you can really utilize. First off, let's talk about the repulsor. I think the best way to use this is to actually bait enemies into thinking that they can melee you, right? That is what you really want to do. You're kind of not showing that you have this item. You're pushing forward, you're being a little aggressive, you're showing yourself a little bit. And when you see the writing on the wall that they're coming in for a melee, you repulse them back, you're gonna be able to get a free kill on them and shoot them. And this is just an amazing weapon up against things like shotguns and energy swords, of course. But I think even better than that is the thruster. And you can do some crazy mix-ups with your movement with thruster. You can do things like crouch, crouch, jump to the right, dash to the left, and that mix-up is just incredible. It's very hard for someone to have their crosshair perfectly on you. And the thing that I love most about the thruster is there are some situations where you can actually turn a damage like disadvantage by making the enemy think that you are disengaging. So something that you can actually do is, let's say the enemy gets a shot on you and you're like, all right, I'm gonna dip, and the enemy's kind of close. So you turn the corner and the enemy's trying to run after you past the corner to chase you and finish you off. But right when you turn the corner, what you're actually gonna do here is turn around, jump the corner, and thrust out. And what this does is completely breaks the ankles of the enemy. You're gonna be flying, as they're turning the corner to the left, you're gonna be flying past them on the right incredibly far. And you gotta understand, you're jumping, going that direction, and thrusting in that direction while they're turning the other direction. if this player is not low sensitivity mouse and keyboard, or if this player is on controller, they're gonna completely lose you. And you can do this and already adjust your crosshair placement to be right on where they'll end up. And it can be a really great mix-up. And there's a lot of mix-ups you could do if you get creative and you really think about map geometry and things like that. I would highly suggest making sure that you grab these items and utilize them to try to win your 1v1s. But if you have any more suggestions for tips, definitely let our community know down below. Thank you so much for coming by. Smash that like, subscribe if you enjoyed the content, and I'll see you next time.